Hello, my fellow friends and my classes. This is Colonel Gallagher on St. Patrick's Day, coming to you with a special announcement. Now, let me get into the home front part two on this wonderful St. Patty's Day that we're using. Uh, I did send you this as an attachment. This is the Lend-Lease. When you look at it, you got to understand that this goes with the home front. Who's making all those ships, who's making all those tanks, who's producing the bullets, who's doing the rivets. And this does go back to the idea of what the Americans are going to need. It's an all-out effort. And I'll try to keep this short. Right, yeah. For me, that's about 50 minutes. No, it's going to be about 5-10, I hope. I just want to add in a few things, some fillers. I don't want to overwhelm too much. But you know the overextension of this, the bigger picture. And the bigger picture right now is that the Americans are in the war, 1942. What the United States has to do, lesson kind of from World War I, is get everybody over there. And it's very important to keep that pipeline open to Europe, to England. June of 1941, you know this perhaps in world history, June of 1941, the Soviet Union is now at war with Hitler, with Germany. And so this becomes important. Thus, that's why I sent this to you. You look at the Lend-Lease, the idea of the Americans getting these goods out to the rest of the world. So think on that, the arsenal of democracy. And yet at home, the practices of democracy become important. There's hope for this change. Not all were treated equal, and I think you know this, but this is going to modify. This is going to amplify. And as you get to the end of World War II, I told you this is the idea of the civil rights movement. This is really the launching pad in a sense. Let me give you the one last brief piece of Homefront Part 2. So now the United States is in the war. We already looked at Midway in class on the idea of the sinking of the Akagi, the Koryu, the four key Japanese aircraft carriers, and now the Americans have outfitted, refitted. The repair ships weren't hit, remember, in Pearl Harbor. The fuel depot, absolutely essential. So now what happens is we've got this isolation of Japan, and the idea is hopping towards the castle, which is Japan. Take the war to them. But let's look to the Atlantic real quick. Battle for the Atlantic is the first thing. We can't land any troops yet. We don't want to get anybody. We got to get everybody over there. We got to make the Atlantic safe. And the key guy I sent to you, so you know his name, how it's spelled, is Karl Donitz. Donitz is this brilliant admiral in the Germans. And he's got all these U-boats, these wolf packs that are hunting ships, and they're right off the coast of the United States. Tourists can see them, you know, and they're torpedoing the American ships, especially the tankers. And this is known as Operation Drumbeat, there's a good book called Operation Drumbeat if you want to read it. That Donitz is sinking American ships very effectively. And he's blowing up. He ends up sinking in January of 1942, ends up sinking within 2 weeks, 35 American ships. He ends up sinking in total, when you look at it, there's 216 by the time you get 3 months in, by March. This is March. 3 months, you have 216 ships. And what's complicating this is the American tourist trade. They refuse in places like Miami and Atlantic City and so on like this to dim the lights. This is the problem, the domestic nature of it, of tourism and money. And so they say no, and it creates what one historian has called a neon shooting gallery. I love that. That's David Kennedy. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy, for that wonderful phrase. And the Germans are just blasting away, sinking tankers. So why am I bringing this up? The Americans have to get this over to Europe. Now we're fully involved. We have to get troops over there. This isn't very good. And so the other part of it is who's manufacturing, refitting these ships. This goes back to the home front in a way. But what you have to do now is win the American way of war. And the American way of war is always overwhelming force. We're gonna just shoot everything at you. We're gonna beat you down. This is big war. And in essence, now you have to win the war of the Atlantic. And where you get the Pacific link to this is an admiral named Admiral King out in the Pacific. Now FDR and George Marshall, which we mentioned in class, has convinced King he has to send some things to win the Battle of the Atlantic. And this is the B-24 Liberator. Comes out and starts hunting these German subs. And see, these German subs, they can't stay out for long times. They have to come up. And so what happens is you begin this process of hunting the Germans. Why this matters is the German happy time, as they call it, of sinking the American ships, changes in 1943. And I don't have my map, and I don't know why. I can't find it. And you can Google this, the Battle for the Atlantic, and you see all these maps. You find better interactive maps than I can give of the numbers of sinkings, which is just absolutely shocking. The Americans aren't doing very well. Well, all of a sudden, by 1943, the tide of the war, pun, is turned. And you begin to see these transport sea lanes then becomes the key two words in the Pacific and in the Atlantic. By the way, to end it, two authors. We're going to get literature here. Ernest Hemingway actually became part of the solution in the Atlantic and joined what became comically known as Hooligan's Navy. And there are a bunch of these guys that got yachts, and all these little tugboats are out there defending and trying to spot. And this is just the great Navy at work right now, World War II. So when he says, here we were, and we were going to just sweep the Germans out. No, not quite, not in the beginning. When you study Hooligan's Navy, you can Google that. Hooligan's Navy. It's funny because there's Ernest Hemingway out there having a beer or two. And in honor of St. Patrick's Day, right? And they're going out there and they're sinking, they're trying to fight this war. And the other comical part to end with this is you have the British who've we now done lend-lease with ships and so on like this. And the irony is now we had to have lend-lease with an option to borrow because now the British are giving back to us the ships and the goods we need to fight the battle for the Atlantic. So I like this lend-lease with an option to borrow. The last literary person I want to mention, this is kind of relevant to the context today, is F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald, you probably know him in the literature class. I've read him. I would look at, which was an amazing book, is The Great Gatsby, which characterized the Jazz Age, probably no better than any other book. And The Great Gatsby was a massive failure until World War II. And if you want to get this, in World War II, you had an agency created called the Council on Books in Wartime. In February 1943, they wanted to send books and readings over to the soldiers. And this was kind of to pep them up. Because the irony to me here is, in Hitler's Germany, you burn books. And FDR even had a quote saying, this is a group of people who burn books, who destroy knowledge. He said, we, the United States, we embrace this. It will win the war. This is a battle of ideas then. That's why I love that segment. It's a battle of ideas. And F. Scott Fitzgerald his works were catapulted to the top because all these soldiers are now reading F. Scott Fitzgerald. And they're reading The Great Gatsby and they're falling in love with it because here I am out there in Anzio or in Italy in this horror show or in the Pacific. And what's my escapism is F. Scott Fitzgerald and his book. And I love it because it's about the 20s and it's about that jazz age. It's reminding me of better times. Okay, and this is it. We're in the middle of a crisis. Crises are handled by leaders, poorly or otherwise, but that's the mark of good leadership, is how to handle a crisis. And this is what the American people are doing. It's all of us. It's not just the generals, and this is what I'm trying to give you this history. It's the common person and the difference that can be made. And this is the good news. With FDR, the wonderful fireside chats, you need to be positive. You need to talk to your friends. You need to get out there in the sense of social distancing in the media. And it is the sense that what was born in 1776 was defended. When you go to Washington, D.C., there's a stone there that reads, in the 18th century was Washington, the 19th century was Lincoln, and these very great ideas of the 20th were defended by those in the 20th century. And it was about the idea of sacrifice, but it was the idea of defending and making the difference. Okay, so that's where I'm going to end the home front part 2. We will begin to look at getting the soldiers over there. We will move next into the Atlantic theater. And then finally, we'll shift back to the Pacific a little bit, and we'll talk about a bit about combat and the soldiers, but always the home front. Always the home front, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of home front, I hope you're happy home, and I hope you're safe home, and I hope your family is. I will see you again on another day besides St. Patty's Day, and I can't wait to be reunited with you, my loved ones. Okay, you guys have a good day, and thank you very much.